Sandra Bullock steps out of her modest sedan, handing the keys to the valet with a warm smile. She's dressed in simple jeans, a comfortable sweater, and worn sneakers, a stark contrast to the glittering facade of Stella, one of Beverly Hills's most exclusive dining establishments. Her hair is pulled back in a casual ponytail, her face bearing minimal makeup after a long day at the Children's Hospital charity event where she'd spent hours reading to kids undergoing cancer treatment. "Thank you," she says to the young valet, who barely glances at her, assuming she's just another casual visitor who wandered into the wrong place. Sandra doesn't mind. She's never been one to announce her presence. Stella isn't just any restaurant. It's a symphony of elegance and sophistication. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over marble floors, while floor-to-ceiling windows offer breathtaking views of the city lights below. The subtle sounds of a live pianist float through the air, complementing the soft murmur of conversation, and the gentle clink of fine china. Every detail, from the hand-painted ceiling murals to the custom silverware, speaks of meticulous attention and refined taste. As Sandra pushes through the heavy glass doors, she pauses to take in the atmosphere, not as a celebrity but as an observer. For her, this moment of anonymity is precious. What few people know is that Stella is more than just a restaurant to Sandra. It's her creation, her vision brought to life, named after her beloved grandmother, who taught her to cook in a tiny kitchen in Virginia. Marcus Weber stands at the reception podium, scanning the reservation list with practiced precision. At 28, he's quickly risen through the ranks at Stella due to his immaculate attention to detail and knack for recognizing important guests. Tonight, he's dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his brown hair meticulously styled, his posture impeccable. To Marcus, Stella isn't just a workplace, it's a stage where he performs nightly, catering to the elite of Beverly Hills. "So appearances matter here," he often reminds new staff members. "We serve experiences, not just food." Sandra approaches the podium, her steps unhurried. "Good evening," she says, her voice warm but quiet. Marcus looks up, his practiced smile freezing slightly as he takes in her casual appearance. His eyes perform a quick assessment. No designer labels, no luxury watch, no reservation from what he can see. A slight furrow appears between his brows, almost imperceptible to anyone who isn't watching closely. "Good evening," he replies, his tone noticeably cooler than the one he used with the couple in formal attire just moments ago. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, I don't," Sandra admits with a small smile. "I was hoping you might have a table available. Something quiet, if possible." Marcus glances at his tablet, then surveys the dining room with exaggerated deliberation. The restaurant is busy but not full. Several prime tables remain unoccupied, reserved for VIP guests who might arrive without notice. "Well," he says, with a tight smile, "we're quite busy tonight, as you can see. We typically require reservations weeks in advance." He pauses, letting the implication hang in the air. "But perhaps we can accommodate you." Sandra nods gratefully, either missing or ignoring his condescending tone. "That would be wonderful, thank you." Marcus steps out from behind the podium, gesturing for her to follow. Instead of leading her to one of the vacant tables with city views, he navigates through the dining room toward the back, past the restrooms, to a small table positioned directly beside the swinging kitchen doors. "Will this be suitable?" he asks, already pulling out the chair. The table wobbles slightly as he does so. "It's a bit more casual. I think you'll be comfortable here." From this position, Sandra can hear the clatter of dishes and the sharp calls of the kitchen staff. The elegant piano music is nearly drowned out by these sounds, and the golden lighting that enhances the beauty of the main dining area barely reaches this shadowy corner. "This is fine, thank you," Sandra says, maintaining her composure as she takes the seat. Marcus places a menu in front of her, with less care than he would for other guests. "Our sommelier is quite busy with a private party, so I'll be handling your wine selection tonight," he says, the statement clearly implying she wouldn't know the difference anyway. "Can I bring you some water while you look over the menu?" "Yes, please," Sandra responds, opening the leather-bound menu. As Marcus walks away, he pauses at the service station where a colleague is preparing a bread basket. Table 36, he mutters. Probably just here to take pictures for social media. I give her 10 minutes before she asks for the cheapest item on the menu. Sandra doesn't hear his comment, but she notices the glances from nearby diners who seem surprised by her placement. She smiles to herself, remembering her grandmother's words. How people treat you when they think you're nobody tells you everything you need to know about them. Across the dining room, Elena Martinez, a veteran server who has worked at Stella since its opening day, watches the interaction with concern. There's something familiar about the woman Marcus has seated in the corner, something in her eyes and the graceful way she carries herself. Eleanor narrows her eyes, trying to place where she's seen that face before. Marcus returns with a water glass, placing it on the table without a coaster. Are you ready to order, or do you need explanation? Of the menu items? He asks. The question itself a subtle insult. What happens next will not only change Marcus's evening, but transform the entire atmosphere of Stella Restaurant. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories about humility and unexpected lessons, subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we're sharing another inspiring celebrity encounter that will warm your heart. Sandra studies the menu with practiced ease, her eyes, noting not just the dishes but the layout, descriptions and pricing. Despite her net worth of millions, she's never lost touch with the value of money. Her grandmother had raised her to appreciate every dollar earned, a lesson that stayed with her even after achieving Hollywood success. Have you decided? Marcus returns after making her wait twice as long as other tables, his leather notepad held with theatrical importance. Yes, Sandra replies with a gentle smile. I'd like to start with the roasted beet salad and then the Chilean sea bass, please. Marcus raises an eyebrow almost imperceptibly. The sea bass is one of Stella's signature dishes, priced at $65. The sea bass is quite sophisticated, he says, emphasizing the word as if it might be beyond her comprehension. Chef prepares it with a champagne beurre blanc and imported truffles. It's one of our more premium offerings. It sounds wonderful, Sandra responds, unperturbed. And for wine? He asks, clearly expecting her to balk at the prices. What would you recommend? With the sea bass? Sandra asks, genuinely curious about his knowledge. Marcus hadn't expected this question. Most guests he seated in this corner simply ordered whatever was cheapest. Well, he begins, slightly flustered, our sommelier would typically suggest the Pouligny Montrachet, but it's $32 a glass. That sounds perfect, Sandra says, closing her menu and handing it back. Marcus takes the menu, surprised and slightly annoyed that his attempt to intimidate her with prices failed. Very well, I'll put your order in right away. His tone suggests the opposite. As Marcus walks away, Sandra observes the restaurant operations with a professional eye. She notices the efficient choreography of the servers, the timing between courses at other tables, the presentation of dishes as they emerge from the kitchen. This isn't just dinner for her. It's a quality check of the vision she established 5 years ago when she opened Stella, naming it after the grandmother who taught her that food was about bringing people together, not keeping them apart. Atio. The server station, Marcus inputs Sandra's order into the system with deliberate slowness. Table 36 ordered the sea bass, he tells a fellow server named Jason. Probably saving up for months to eat here, he adds with a smirk. Maybe she just likes good food, Jason responds, uncomfortable with Marcus's attitude. In those clothes? Hat Stella, Marcus scoffs. She's clearly out of her element. I bet she doesn't even know what truffles are. Eleanor, the veteran server who had been watching earlier, approaches the station. At 58, she's worked in restaurants longer than Marcus has been alive, including 5 years at Stella since its opening day. Marcus, she says gently, every guest deserves our best service. That's always been the policy here. I know the policy, Marcus replies defensively. I'm just being realistic about the clientele. Elena gives him a knowing look. There's something familiar about her. I can't quite place it, but she's nobody, Marcus interrupts. Trust me, I know our regulars. Across the dining room, a well-dressed couple seated near the windows notices Sandra's treatment. The woman, wearing a tasteful diamond necklace, leans toward her husband. "Did you see how that server spoke to the woman in the corner? It was so condescending." Her husband nods. "Disgraceful. Everyone deserves respect regardless of what they're wearing." Sandra remains composed at her table, observing everything while appearing to notice nothing. When a busser brings bread to her table, she thanks him by name after glancing at his badge, asking how his evening is going. The young man, startled by this simple courtesy that most guests don't offer, smiles genuinely for the first time that night. Marcus returns with the beet salad, placing it unceremoniously on the table. "Your appetizer," he announces flatly. "The kitchen is quite busy tonight, so the main course may take some time." This is a lie. The kitchen is running with typical efficiency, but Marcus has flagged her order as low priority. "That's not a problem," Sandra replies. "Actually, I'm curious. How long has Stella been open? The atmosphere is beautiful." Caught off guard by the question, Marcus provides a mechanical answer. 5 years. We're one of the most exclusive restaurants in Beverly Hills." There's pride in his voice, as if he personally built the place. Sandra nods thoughtfully. "The design is remarkable. I love how the lighting creates individual atmospheres at each table, even back here." Marcus hadn't expected her to notice such details. Most guests he deemed unworthy simply ate quickly and left. "Yes, well, the owner was quite particular about the design elements," he says, unable to resist an opportunity to display knowledge. Everything from the custom Italian marble to the hand-blown glass fixtures was specially commissioned. "Is the owner often here?" Sandra asks innocently. "Not recently," Marcus replies, regaining his condescending tone. "She's quite busy with other ventures, I imagine." The implication that he has insider knowledge about the owner is clear, though entirely fabricated. As Sandra enjoys her salad, she notices Elena watching her from across the room with a puzzled expression. Their eyes meet briefly, and Sandra offers a warm smile. Something flickers in Elena's gaze, a moment of potential recognition. Marcus, noticing this exchange, quickly moves to intercept Elena before she can approach Sandra's table. "I've got table 36 covered," he says firmly. "Focus on your section." Elena hesitates. "Marcus, I think that might be a walk-in who shouldn't even be here," he finishes for her. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." When Marcus returns to check on Sandra's appetizer, he finds the plate empty. "Was everything satisfactory?" he asks, the question perfunctory. "It was delicious," Sandra replies sincerely. "Perfectly balanced, high." "Praise from someone who's probably more accustomed to fast food," Marcus mutters, just loudly enough for her to hear. Sandra looks up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. There's no anger in her eyes, but something else. A quiet assessment. That makes Marcus shift uncomfortably. "You know," she says softly, "my grandmother always said you can tell a person's character not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those they believe are beneath them." Marcus stands frozen, unsure how to respond to this unexpected comment. Before he can formulate a reply, Chef Michael emerges from the kitchen, scanning the dining room with purpose. For 20 years, he's worked in the finest restaurants across 3 continents, and for the past 5 years, Stella has been his culinary home. What happens next will shift the entire dynamic of the evening, as the truth behind Sandra's presence at Stella begins to emerge. The consequences of Marcus's behavior are about to unfold in ways he never anticipated, revealing lessons about judgment, respect, and the true meaning of service that will resonate throughout the restaurant. Chef Michael pauses at the kitchen entrance, his trained eye surveying the dining room with the precision of a battlefield commander. At 53, with salt and pepper hair and the posture of someone who has spent decades standing over hot stoves, he commands respect without saying a word. His gaze falls momentarily on Sandra's table in the corner, a flicker of recognition, crossing his face before Marcus intercepts him. "Chef, is everything all right?" Marcus asks, positioning himself to block Chef Michael's view of Sandra. "The sea bass for table 36, Chef Michael says, his French accent still prominent after 20 years in America. "I prepared it myself. I want to make sure it's delivered properly." Marcus's smile tightens. "I'll handle it personally, Chef. No need for you to worry about that particular table. Chef Michael's eyes narrow slightly, but the arrival of an important food critic at another table diverts his attention. He nods curtly and returns to the kitchen, leaving Marcus relieved but unsettled. Sandra sits patiently, observing the interaction from a distance. She notices how Marcus immediately returns to fawning over tables in the center of the restaurant, the mayor and his wife, a famous producer, a tech billionaire, while deliberately avoiding her corner. It's been over 40 minutes since her appetizer was cleared, twice the wait time of other tables who ordered after her. At a nearby table, the couple who had been watching the situation exchange concerned glances. "This is getting ridiculous," the woman whispers to her husband. She's been waiting forever while he pampers everyone else. The husband nods. "I've half a mind to say something." Eventually, Marcus approaches Sandra's table with her sea base. Instead of presenting the dish with the usual flourish given to other patrons, he practically drops the plate in front of her. "Your sea base," he announces flatly. Can I get you anything else?" His tone suggests he hopes the answer is no. Sandra looks at the dish, then back at Marcus. "This isn't sea base," she says quietly. "Excuse me?" Marcus responds, irritation creeping into his voice. "This is halibut," Sandra corrects him gently. "And it's not prepared with the champagne beurre blanc and truffles as described. This has a citrus sauce." Marcus stares at her, momentarily speechless. She's right, of course. In his determination to provide lackluster service, he grabbed the wrong dish from the pass. But rather than admit his mistake, he doubles down. "I assure you, ma'am, this is our sea base," he says condescendingly. "Perhaps you're not familiar with how it's properly prepared in establishments of this caliber. The menu description is more conceptual than literal." Sandra smiles, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "I understand, but I did order the sea base." Marcus's jaw tightens. "Let me check with the kitchen," he says stiffly, taking the plate and walking away. At the server station, Marcus fumes. "Table 36 is being difficult," he tells Jason. "Says I brought her the wrong dish, like she's some kind of culinary expert." Jason glances at the plate. "Marcus, that is halibut. Look at the texture." "I know that," Marcus snaps. "But does she need to make a scene about it? People like her come here once in a blue moon and think they deserve the same treatment as our regulars who spend thousands weekly." Elena, who has been quietly monitoring the situation, steps forward. "Marcus, enough. I've been watching how you've treated that guest all evening, and it's unacceptable. If you don't want to serve her properly—" "I will." "Stay out of this, Elena," Marcus replies sharply. "This is my section, my customer." "Then act like the professional you claim to be," Elena counters, her voice low but firm. Reluctantly, Marcus returns to the kitchen to request the proper dish. When he brings the actual sea bass to Sandra 15 minutes later, his demeanor has shifted from condescension to barely concealed hostility. "Your sea bass," he announces, placing the correct dish before her. "As you can clearly see, this one has the champagne sauce and truffles." He emphasizes the words as if speaking to a child. "Will this be satisfactory, or would you like to consult with our chef personally?" Sandra looks at the dish, then meets his gaze. "This looks wonderful, thank you." Marcus hovers awkwardly, caught off guard by her continued politeness in the face of his rudeness. "Is there anything else you need? Perhaps a culinary dictionary?" The sarcasm is unmistakable. "Actually," Sandra says, her voice still calm, "I'd love to know more about the restaurant's wine cellar. I understand it's quite impressive." Marcus blinks, thrown by the request. Most patrons would have complained to management by now. "We have over 500 selections," he replies automatically, falling back on memorized facts. "Our collection has won the Wine Spectator Award of Excellence 3 years running." "That's remarkable," Sandra says genuinely. "Who curates the selection?" "Our head sommelier, Antoine. He personally visits vineyards worldwide," Marcus says, his tone suggesting this information is too sophisticated for her to appreciate. As they speak, an elegant older gentleman from a nearby table stands and approaches. Dressed in an impeccable suit that speaks of old money and refinement, he carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to respect. "Excuse me," he says, addressing Sandra directly while ignoring Marcus. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I couldn't help noticing the exceptional patience you've shown this evening. I'm Thomas Whitfield, a regular here since opening night. Before Sandra can respond, Marcus steps between them. Mr. Whitfield, can I help you with something? I'm sure your table needs attention. Young man, Thomas says, his polite tone carrying a note of steel. I was addressing the lady, not you. Marcus flushes, caught between respecting a valued customer and controlling a situation rapidly slipping from his grasp. Of course, sir, but as her server, Thomas interrupts smoothly. Perhaps you might give us a moment. It's not a request. Marcus retreats a few steps, hovering uncomfortably as Thomas turns back to Sandra. This restaurant used to embody hospitality in its truest form, Thomas tells her quietly. When it opened, the owner made a point of treating every guest with equal dignity, regardless of appearance or status. It's disappointing to see how quickly those values can erode in the hands of those who don't understand them. Sandra nods thoughtfully. Values are only as strong as the people who uphold them daily, she replies. Thomas smiles, a flash of recognition crossing his features. Indeed they are, and I believe some people are about to receive a powerful reminder of that fact tonight. Across the dining room, Chef Michael emerges once more from the kitchen, this time accompanied by the restaurant manager, David Chen. They scan the room with purpose, their expressions serious as they confer quietly. When David's gaze lands on Sandra's table, his face pales visibly. The evening's conflict is about to reach its breaking point as Marcus remains oblivious to the storm gathering around him, a storm centered on the woman he has been determinedly mistreating all evening. The consequences of judging someone based solely on appearance are about to unfold dramatically, changing the atmosphere of Stella Restaurant forever. David Chen, Stella's general manager, whispers urgently to Chef Michael while maintaining a composed exterior. At 42, David has managed restaurants for celebrities and royalty alike, but the sight of Sandra Bullock sitting in the restaurant's worst corner has sent a chill through him, unlike anything in his career. How long has she been here? David asks, his voice barely audible. I'm not sure, Chef Michael replies. I noticed her when I prepared the sea base, but I was pulled away by the critic from Gourmet Quarterly. And she's been seated by the kitchen? David's professional mask slips momentarily, revealing genuine alarm. Before they can make their way across the dining room, Marcus intercepts them, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. David, chef, is everything all right? He asks with practiced concern. Mr. Fontaine at table 12 is asking about the 82 Bordeaux we discussed last week. David barely glances at Marcus. Handle it, he says dismissively, his attention fixed on Sandra's table where Thomas Whitfield is now returning to his own seat. Marcus frowns, unaccustomed to being brushed aside. But Sir Mr. Fontaine specifically asked for you to— Not now, Marcus, David cuts him off. We have a more pressing situation. As David and Chef Michael start toward Sandra's table, they're waylaid by the mayor, who stands to greet them, forcing them into a conversation they can't politely escape. From her corner, Sandra notices this interaction with quiet amusement, taking another bite of her sea bass, which, despite everything, is exquisitely prepared. Elena approaches Sandra's table with a fresh glass of water, seizing the opportunity, while Marcus is occupied with Mr. Fontaine. How is everything? Elena asks, her voice warm with genuine concern. The sea bass is magnificent, Sandra replies honestly. Perfectly cooked. Elena hesitates, then lowers her voice. I wanted to apologize for the service tonight. It's not what we stand for here at Stella. Sandra smiles gently. You have nothing to apologize for, Elena. You haven't done anything wrong. Elena's eyes widen slightly at the use of her name, though she's wearing her name tag. Thank you, but still, Stella was founded on the principle that every guest deserves exceptional service. I've been here since opening day, and I remember how passionate the owner was about that. Tell me about the opening day, Sandra prompts. Taking a sip of her wine, Elena's face lights up with the memory. It was magical. Miss Bullock had transformed this space from an old, forgotten building into something beautiful. She walked through every table, making sure each guest felt welcome regardless of who they were. Eleanor pauses, lost in recollection. She told us that the restaurant was named after her grandmother, who believed that a table should never divide people, only bring them together. Sandra's eyes soften. That's a beautiful philosophy. Elena nods, then looks more closely at Sandra, a dawning recognition in her gaze. You know, you remind me of Elena. Marcus's sharp voice cuts through their conversation as he strides toward them. What are you doing in my section? Table 22 has been trying to get your attention. Elena straightens up, professional once more. I was just checking if everything was satisfactory. That's my job, Marcus says firmly. I'm sure table 36 is perfectly fine, aren't you, ma'am? His tone makes it clear that there's only one acceptable answer. Eleanor has been lovely, Sandra replies, a hint of steel beneath her polite tone. It's nice to experience such genuine hospitality. Marcus narrows his eyes, detecting the subtle critique. Well, I'm here now. Is there anything you need? Actually, Sandra says, I'd love to hear about the restaurant's history. Elena was just telling me about opening night. I doubt our regular customers bore other guests with tedious operational details, Marcus says dismissively. Eleanor, your tables need you. Eleanor hesitates, torn between professional protocol and her growing certainty about Sandra's identity. With the apologetic glance at Sandra, she departs, leaving Marcus once again in control of the table. Across the dining room, the couple who've been observing the situation all evening exchange troubled glances. This has gone on long enough, the woman says, placing her napkin on the table. I'm going to say something to the manager. Her husband nods in agreement. It's shameful. Everyone deserves basic respect. As they signal for David's attention, Thomas Whitfield also watches the scene unfold with increasing disapproval. He's been coming to Stella every week since it opened, drawn not just by the exceptional cuisine, but by the philosophy Sandra Bullock had infused into every aspect of the establishment. In a quiet moment 5 years ago, she had told him her vision. I want to create a place where the person who saved for months to celebrate a special occasion receives the same care as the regular who comes weekly, where we see the human before the wallet. Thomas watches Marcus's treatment of Sandra with growing indignation, recognizing how far certain staff have strayed from these founding principles. When Sandra excuses herself to visit the restroom, Marcus barely acknowledges her. As she walks through the dining room, several patrons notice her with that vague recognition reserved for celebrities spotted out of context, the certainty that they know this person paired with uncertainty about from where. In the elegant hallway leading to the restrooms, Sandra encounters a wall of framed photographs documenting Stella's opening night. She pauses before one that captures her, 5 years younger, cutting a ribbon alongside Chef Michael and David. Her fingers gently touch the frame, remembering that moment of pride and possibility. It was a beautiful night, comes a voice behind her. Sandra turns to find Elena, who is followed with purpose. I knew it was you, Elena continues, her voice hushed with emotion. I wasn't completely sure at first. You were so dressed up at the opening, and tonight you're just me. Sandra finishes with a smile. Why are you letting him treat you that way? Elena asks, genuine confusion in her voice. You own this place. Sandra's expression turns thoughtful. Sometimes you learn more about a place by experiencing it as others might. I heard rumors that some staff were treating guests differently based on appearances. I needed to see for myself. Elena nods slowly, understanding dawning. What are you going to do? What do you think I should do? Sandra asks, genuinely curious. Fire him, Elena replies immediately, then catches herself. I'm sorry, that was unprofessional of me. Sandra laughs softly. No, it was honest. But firing someone doesn't teach them anything. It just moves the problem elsewhere. She pauses, considering. I think Marcus deserves the opportunity to learn, don't you? Before Elena can respond, they hear Marcus's voice, sharp with annoyance, as he speaks to a busser. Table 36 isn't a priority. Focus on the center tables. That's where the real customers are. Sandra and Eleanor exchange looks. Though I admit, Sandra adds with a wry smile, my patience isn't infinite. As they return to the dining room, they see David and Chef Michael finally making their way towards Sandra's table, concern evident in their hurried pace. The evening is reaching its turning point, as the truth of Sandra's identity is about to collide with Marcus's arrogance in a moment that will transform the atmosphere of Stella forever. What happens next will not only change Marcus's understanding of respect and dignity, but will remind everyone present of the power of humility and the danger of judging others based solely on appearance. The dining room of Stella has transformed. What began as an ordinary evening of fine dining has evolved into something else entirely, a theater of whispers, glances, and growing recognition. The elegant space with its soft lighting and gentle piano music now vibrates with a different energy as conversations pause and resume in hushed tones. "I'm telling you, that's her," a woman at table 14 whispers to her companion. "Sandra Bullock, the owner." "Don't be ridiculous," her husband replies, though uncertainty colors his voice. "Why would she be sitting by the kitchen dressed like that?" Across the room, similar conversations multiply. The whispers travel from table to table like ripples in a pond, growing more certain with each retelling. The woman who had planned to speak to the manager about Sandra's treatment now sits back down, her expression a mixture of shock and anticipation. "This is going to be interesting," she tells her husband, who nods in agreement. Thomas Whitfield, ever the observer, sips his wine with the satisfied expression of someone watching justice prepare to unfold naturally. When a server refills his water, he murmurs, "Sometimes the universe delivers lessons more effective than any we could design." Sandra returns to her corner table, still unacknowledged by Marcus, who is busy fawning over a table of executives in expensive suits. She resumes eating her sea bass with no outward indication that anything has changed, though Elena, now hyper-aware of the situation, watches from a respectful distance. David and Chef Michael continue their strategic advance across the dining room, delayed by the social obligations of running a high-end restaurant. When the mayor finally releases them from conversation, they're intercepted by a wine distributor eager to discuss a rare vintage. David's expression betrays his growing anxiety as he glances repeatedly towards Sandra's corner. Marcus, oblivious to the changing atmosphere, stops at the service station to complain to Jason. Table 36 is finally eating. With any luck, she'll skip dessert and leave. Jason shifts uncomfortably, no longer meeting Marcus's eyes. "Maybe you should ease up a bit." "Why?" Marcus scoffs. "People like that need to understand that some places aren't for everyone. It's like showing up at the Oscars in sweats." A busser nearby freezes mid-motion, staring at Marcus with wide eyes before hurrying away. Marcus doesn't notice, too consumed. They're with his own narrative. "The worst part is how she pretends to know about food," he continues, questioning whether I brought the right dish, as if a woman in Target jeans would know the difference between sea bass and halibut. Jason takes a step back. "Marcus, I really think you should—" "What?" "Treat her like she's someone important." Marcus laughs. "Trust me, no one who matters comes to Stella dressed like that." What Marcus doesn't realize is that his voice, pitched to carry over the restaurant noise, has carried further than intended. Several nearby patrons turn in their seats, expressions ranging from discomfort to outright disapproval. The pianist, sensing the shift in mood, transitions to a softer, more contemplative piece. Sandra, hearing Marcus's comments clearly, doesn't react visibly. Instead, she takes out her phone and makes a few notes. To the casual observer, she might be checking emails or sending a text. In reality, she's documenting the evening's events with the careful attention to detail that has made her both a successful actress and businesswoman. A young couple celebrating their anniversary at the next table leans closer to Sandra. "Excuse me," the woman says hesitantly, "but aren't you Sandra Bullock?" Before Sandra can respond, Marcus materializes at the table, inserting himself between them. "I apologize for the interruption," he says to Sandra, his tone falsely solicitous. "Is everything satisfactory with your meal?" "It's wonderful," Sandra replies calmly. "The sea bass is perfectly prepared." "Excellent," Marcus says, then turns to the young couple. "I'm sure my customer would appreciate being allowed to enjoy her dinner in peace." The emphasis on "my customer" is subtle but clear, a statement of territory rather than service. The young woman blushes. Of course, I'm sorry, I just thought— It's no problem at all, Sandra assures her with a warm smile. And yes, I am. Marcus freezes, his brain processing this exchange a beat too slow. You're what? He asks, confusion evident. Sandra Bullock, she clarifies simply, turning her attention back to her sea base. Marcus laughs, the sound brittle and artificial. Right, and I'm Brad Pitt. If you're done with your main course, would you like to see the dessert menu? The young couple exchanges. Mortified glances. Realizing Marcus doesn't believe his own customer, the husband opens his mouth to speak, but Sandra catches his eye and gives a slight shake of her head, a request for discretion that he respects with reluctant silence. I'd love to see the dessert menu, Sandra says, her composure intact. And perhaps you could tell me about the restaurant's philanthropy program while I decide. Marcus blinks, thrown by the specific request. Philanthropy program? Yes, Sandra continues. I understand Stella donates 5% of its monthly profits to the Children's Hospital Foundation and offers culinary internships to underprivileged youth. I'm curious how that's going. This information, accurate and detailed knowledge about Stella's internal operations, causes Marcus's confident facade to crack slightly. I'm not privy to those details, he admits, suddenly less certain. That's a shame, Sandra remarks. It was one of the founding principles of the restaurant. I'd have thought all staff would be briefed on it. As Marcus retreats to fetch the dessert menu, visibly unsettled, David finally breaks free from his social obligations. With Chef Michael close behind, he makes a direct line toward Sandra's table, his professional smile strained by genuine concern. Elena intercepts them halfway. She knows, she says quietly. She knows how he's been treating her. Chef Michael swears softly in French, and she's just sitting there taking it? She said something about wanting to experience the restaurant as others might, Elena explains. I think she's testing us, David pales, and we're failing miserably. Across the room, the whispers have become a steady current of realization. More diners recognize Sandra now that they're looking for her, her identity shifting from speculation to certainty. Phones discreetly emerge from purses and pockets, not to take photos but to search for confirmation. Images of Sandra Bullock, owner of Stella, compared to the woman sitting patiently in the corner. Thomas Whitfield rises from his table once more, his expression determined. As Marcus returns with the dessert menu, Thomas times his approach perfectly, arriving at Sandra's table just as Marcus begins his rehearsed dessert spiel. Ms. Bullock, Thomas says clearly, his voice carrying just enough to be heard at nearby tables. I hope you'll forgive the interruption, but I wanted to personally thank you for what you've created here. Stella has been a true gift to our community. The dessert menu slips from Marcus's fingers, landing on the table with a soft thud. His face, previously flushed with the confidence of perceived authority, now drains of color as realization dawns. With the force of an avalanche, the moment of truth has arrived, and with it the opportunity for a lesson far more valuable than any Marcus could have anticipated when Sandra Bullock walked through the door earlier that evening. Time seems to stand still in Stella's dining room. Marcus stares at Sandra, then at Thomas Whitfield, his mind struggling to reconcile the casually dressed woman he's been disdainfully serving with Sandra Bullock, Academy Award winner, beloved actress, and more importantly at this moment, his employer. Ms. Bullock? He finally manages, the words barely audible. Sandra regards him calmly, neither confirming nor denying Thomas's greeting. Instead, she turns to the distinguished gentleman with a warm smile. Thank you, Thomas. It's always wonderful to see you. Here, how's Margaret doing after her surgery? Much better, thank you for asking, Thomas replies with the easy familiarity of old friends. She's disappointed to miss your annual foundation gala next month. Please tell her we'll save her a seat for next year, Sandra says, her genuine warmth in stark contrast to the hollow hospitality Marcus has been performing all evening. Marcus remains frozen, his universe collapsing around him as the implications of his behavior throughout the evening crash down with devastating clarity. Every condescending remark, every deliberate slight, Every moment of poor service now plays back in his mind with horrifying precision, all directed at the woman who signs his paychecks. David and Chef Michael finally reach the table, their faces a study in professional panic barely contained. "Ms. Bullock," David begins, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal, "we had no idea you were visiting tonight. Had we known—" "That's precisely why I didn't call ahead, David," Sandra interrupts gently. "I wanted to experience Stella, as any other guest might." Chef Michael steps forward, kissing Sandra's hand with European formality. Pure sea bass, it was satisfactory. Despite his attempt at composure, genuine concern shadows his features. "It was exceptional, Michael," Sandra assures him. "Your talent hasn't diminished in the slightest. By now, the entire restaurant has fallen into a hushed silence, all pretense of disinterest abandoned as diners openly watch the scene unfolding. Phones remain respectfully lowered. Stella has always maintained a strict no-photography policy to protect guests' privacy, but every ear strains to catch the exchange. Marcus attempts to regain his professional demeanor. "Ms. Bullock, if you had known who I was," Sandra finishes for him, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now. "You would have treated me differently. That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" The simple question hangs in the air, unanswerable, in any way that wouldn't further indict him. Marcus's mouth opens and closes, no words emerging. "Perhaps," Sandra continues, addressing David now, "we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." David nods quickly. "Of course, the private dining room is available." "Actually," Sandra says, looking around the restaurant at the captivated faces, "I think the manager's office would be more appropriate. This isn't a performance." As Sandra stands, the entire restaurant seems to hold its breath. Several patrons half rise from their seats, a reflexive show of respect. Elena steps forward with Sandra's light jacket, having retrieved it from the coat check without being asked. "Thank you, Elena," Sandra says warmly, "for everything tonight." Thomas Whitfield raises his glass in a subtle toast as Sandra passes. The couple who had been watching all evening exchange satisfied glances. The young couple celebrating their anniversary look on with awe as Hollywood royalty glides past their table. David leads the way toward the back of the restaurant, with Chef Michael following close behind. Marcus trails after them, his usual confident stride replaced by uncertain steps. Sandra walks with the natural grace that has made her a star, acknowledging other diners with small nods but never pausing, the perfect balance of approachability and purpose. As they pass the bartender, who has been watching the evening unfold from a distance, whispers to a waiter, "Marcus is so fired." The manager's office is elegantly appointed but clearly functional, a space where real work happens. Awards and reviews share wall space with staff schedules and inventory reports. A large desk dominates one side, while a comfortable seating area occupies the other. David gestures toward this area, where Sandra takes a seat, her posture relaxed. But attentive, David and Chef Michael sit opposite her, while Marcus hovers uncertainly until Sandra points to a chair. "Please join us." Once they're all seated, an uncomfortable silence descends. David clears his throat. "Ms. Bullock, I want to express our deepest apologies for—" Sandra holds up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "David, before you continue, I want to make something clear. I'm not here to receive apologies from you or Chef Michael. From what I observed tonight, the kitchen is running beautifully, and most of the staff is upholding exactly the standard of service we established when we opened Stella." Relief washes over David's face, followed quickly by concern as he glances at Marcus. "However," Sandra continues, her gaze shifting to Marcus, "there is clearly an issue with how certain staff members determine which guests deserve respect and which don't." Her voice remains measured, neither angry nor accusatory, simply stating, "Facts." Marcus stares at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. "Look at me, please," Sandra requests, and when Marcus raises his gaze, she continues, "I'd like to understand why you felt it was appropriate to seat me by the kitchen, delay my service, bring me the wrong dish, and speak to me with consistent condescension throughout the evening." Marcus swallows hard. "Ms. Bullock, I had no idea." "That's not what I asked," Sandra interrupts firmly. "I didn't ask if you knew who I was. I asked why you felt that behavior was appropriate toward any guest of this restaurant. The room falls silent again, the question hanging in the air like a verdict awaiting delivery. Chef Michael studies his hands, clearly uncomfortable. David shifts in his seat, torn between his role as manager and his instinct to distance himself. From Marcus's actions, Marcus begins, then stops, realizing there is no satisfactory answer. There's no excuse, he finally admits, his voice barely audible. No, Sandra agrees. There isn't. But there might be an explanation, and I'd like to hear it. Marcus takes a deep breath. I judged you based on your appearance, he says, the words coming out in a rush now. I saw your clothes, your lack of reservation, and I decided you didn't belong here, that you weren't worth the same effort as other guests. Sandra nods, neither accepting nor rejecting his explanation. And do you believe that's in line with Stella's founding philosophy? No, ma'am, Marcus replies, using the respectful address that was notably absent earlier. Do you know what that philosophy is? Sandra asks. Marcus hesitates, then glances at David for help. David remains silent, allowing Marcus to navigate this moment on his own. I thought it was about excellence, Marcus offers tentatively, about providing luxury service to people who appreciate it. Interesting, Sandra says. Because when I founded this restaurant and named it after my grandmother, the core belief was that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance, status, or wealth. She leans forward slightly. Stella believed that a person's worth isn't determined by their clothes or wallet, but by their humanity. The weight of these words settles over the room, creating a moment of reflection that no one seems eager to break. Finally, Sandra stands. I think we've given the dining room enough to whisper about for one evening. David, Chef Michael, thank you for maintaining the excellence of our cuisine and operations. I'd like to speak with Marcus alone tomorrow morning at 10. The implication is clear. This conversation isn't over, but it will continue on Sandra's terms. As David and Chef Michael leave the office, their relief at being excused palpable, Sandra turns to Marcus once more. One question before tomorrow. When did you start working at Stella? 6 months ago, Marcus answers. Sandra nods thoughtfully. So you weren't here for the opening or for the staff training where we established our values? It's not a question, but an observation, and perhaps the first step toward understanding how things had gone so wrong. The next morning, Stella Restaurant appears different in daylight. Without the evening ambience, the soft lighting, the background music, the well-dressed patrons, it reveals its bones, the craftsmanship of the woodwork, the quality of the marble, the thoughtful architecture that makes it both elegant and welcoming. Sandra arrives at 9:45, dressed casually but with purpose, jeans paired with a simple blazer, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup highlighting her natural beauty. She carries a small notebook and greets the cleaning staff by name as she makes her way through the quiet dining room. In the manager's office, she reviews reports David left for her, sales figures, customer feedback, staffing changes over the past 6 months. The restaurant has been thriving financially, but something in the customer comments catches her attention. A subtle shift in tone, mentions of selective service and preferential treatment that hadn't appeared in reviews before. At precisely 10:00, there's a knock at the door. Marcus enters, transformed from the previous evening. Gone is the arrogant posture and condescending expression, replaced by genuine humility. He's dressed impeccably as always, but his demeanor suggests he spent a sleepless night contemplating. Here's actions. Good morning, Ms. Bullock, he says, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. Good morning, Marcus, Sandra replies, gesturing to the chair across from her. Please sit down. As he takes his seat, Sandra observes him carefully. Did you get any sleep last night? The question, personal, perceptive, catches him off. God? Not much, he admits. Sandra nods. That's understandable. Realizations that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves rarely make for restful nights. She closes the folder of reports. Tell me how you came to work at Stella. Marcus straightens slightly, on more familiar ground with this question. I worked at Le Cirque in New York for 3 years, then moved to Los Angeles for personal reasons. David hired me based on my experience and recommendations. And during your interview, what did David tell you about Stella's philosophy? Marcus hesitates. He mentioned that it was founded by you, that excellence was non-negotiable, and that you had created it to be the premier dining destination in Beverly Hills. Sandra makes a note. Nothing about our approach to service. Our belief that every guest deserves equal respect, regardless of appearance or perceived status. Marcus looks down. If he did, I didn't give it the attention it deserved. I see, Sandra says, neither accusatory nor forgiving. And in your previous positions, what determined how you treated customers? Efficiency, Marcus answers immediately. Recognizing the high-value clients, the regulars, the influencers, prioritizing them to maximize both their experience and the restaurant's reputation. Sandra leans forward slightly. And who taught you that approach? My first manager at Le Cirque. He said that in high-end restaurants not all customers are equal, that some bring value beyond their bill, connections, influence, repeat business. Marcus pauses. He trained us to recognize designer clothes, luxury watches to gauge customers within seconds of their arrival. Sandra nods thoughtfully. A common philosophy in the industry, but not Stella's, not what my grandmother would have wanted. For the first time, Marcus looks genuinely curious. Your grandmother, was she in the restaurant business? A small smile touches Sandra's lips. No. Stella worked as a cleaner at a hospital for 40 years. She raised me after my parents divorced. We didn't have much, but she taught me that. Dignity costs nothing to give but is priceless to receive. She stands and walks to a small side table where a silver-framed photograph sits, an elderly woman with Sandra's same warm eyes and gentle smile. One Christmas when I was about 12, she saved for months to take me to an upscale restaurant. We dressed in our best clothes, nothing fancy but clean and pressed. Sandra's voice grows quiet with memory. The maitre d' took one look at us and seated us by the kitchen just like you did to me yesterday. Marcus winces at the parallel. The waiter treated us like we were inconveniences, not guests, Sandra continues. I remember my grandmother never complained, never lost her dignity, but I saw the hurt in her eyes. She'd worked so hard for that special night. She returns to her seat, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. When I founded Stella, I made a promise that no one would ever feel that way here. That we would see the person, not the packaging. The office falls silent as Marcus absorbs this revelation, understanding for the first time the deeper wound his behavior had inflicted, not just on a celebrity whose identity he'd failed to recognize, but on the very heart of what Stella represented. I had no idea, he says finally. No, Sandra agrees, you didn't. But ignorance of values isn't an excuse for violating them, especially when those values are fundamental to your workplace. Marcus nods, accepting the rebuke without defense. What happens now, he asks, the question that had kept him awake all night. Sandra studies him for a moment. That depends on you. Most people in my position would simply fire you, and I'd be justified in doing so. Marcus swallows hard but maintains eye contact, ready to accept whatever consequence comes. But firing you accomplishes nothing beyond satisfying a momentary desire for retribution, Sandra continues. You'd leave unchanged, take your attitudes to another restaurant, and perpetuate the same behavior. And Stella would lose the opportunity to truly live its values, including the belief in growth and second chances. Hope flickers in Marcus's expression. Are you offering me a second chance? I'm offering you a choice, Sandra clarifies. Option 1, you can leave Stella today with a reasonable severance package and a neutral reference. Option 2, you can stay, but under very different circumstances. What circumstances? Marcus asks cautiously. For the next month, you'll work alongside Elena, learning from someone who embodies Stella's values. You'll spend time in every position, host, busser, dishwasher, line cook, understanding each role and the dignity in each job. Sandra's expression is determined. You'll also help develop and conduct training for all staff on our core philosophy of equal respect for all guests. Marcus blinks, surprised by both the offer and its conditions. You'd trust me with training others after what I did? Sometimes those who've made mistakes become the most passionate advocates for change, Sandra replies. But this isn't charity, Marcus. It will be hard, humbling work. Your pay will reflect your new temporary position. Your performance will be closely monitored, and at the end of the month, we'll both decide if Stella is truly where you belong, the E. Gravity of the opportunity and its demands settles over Marcus. This isn't just about keeping his job. It's about fundamentally reconsidering his values and approach to service. "Why would you give me this chance?" he asks quietly. Sandra's expression softens slightly. "Because 30 years ago, that waiter who treated my grandmother and me poorly never got the opportunity to understand the impact of his actions or to become better. And because I believe that most people, when shown a better path, want to take it." She extends her hand across the desk. "So, Marcus, what will it be? The easy exit or the harder road of growth?" Without hesitation, Marcus reaches out and shakes, her hand firmly. "I choose to stay and learn. I want to be part of what Stella truly stands for." Sandra nods, a small smile forming. "Then your education begins today." As they stand to leave the office, Marcus asks one final question. "Ms. Bullock, did you know how I would treat you when you came in last night?" Sandra pauses at the door. "I didn't know it would be you specifically, but I'd heard enough to know someone needed a reminder of our founding principles. Sometimes the only way to truly see a problem is to experience it firsthand." The lesson was painful, but as they walk back into the restaurant, Marcus understands it was also necessary, not just for him, but for preserving the soul of what makes Stella special. Marcus's first day of re-education, as Eleanor jokingly calls it, begins in the dish pit, the steamiest, noisiest, most physically demanding section of Stella's kitchen. By 10:30 a.m., his perfectly pressed shirt is soaked with sweat, his manicured hands pruned from hot water, and his designer pants splashed with food remnants. Jorge, the head dishwasher who has worked at Stella since opening day, shows Marcus how to efficiently stack, spray, and load the industrial machines. 15 years I've been washing dishes in restaurants," Jorge tells him in accented English. "My son is in college now because of these hands." Marcus, who previously barely acknowledged the dishwashers, finds himself humbled by Jorge's quiet dignity and the pride he takes in his work. "I never realized how physical this job is," Marcus admits, massaging his lower back during a brief pause. Jorge laughs. "And yet you wonder why sometimes dishes take longer to reach the dining room during rush. Now you understand." By lunchtime, Marcus has gained a new appreciation for the foundation of restaurant operations, clean dishes delivered efficiently. When the lunch service begins, he transitions to bussing tables, working alongside Maya, a single mother putting herself through nursing school. "The trick," Maya explains as she swiftly clears a foretop, "is to be invisible but indispensable. Guests shouldn't notice us working, but would immediately notice if we didn't." Marcus, who had previously seen bussers as interchangeable background figures, now observes Maya's techniques with genuine interest. She remembers regular customers' preferences, anticipates needs before they're expressed, and maintains a warm presence without intruding on diners' experiences. "You're actually providing hospitality," Marcus realizes aloud. "Not just clearing dishes," Maya smiles. "Everyone who works here provides hospitality in their own way. From Jorge to Sandra herself, we're all pieces of the same puzzle." The lunch rush passes in a blur of activity, leaving Marcus exhausted in ways his previous serving shifts never had. His body aches from the unaccustomed physical labor, but there's something satisfying about the tangible results. Clean tables, satisfied guests, a smoothly operating dining room. As the afternoon lull begins, Elena finds Marcus taking a brief break in the staff area. "How's it going?" she asks without a hint of the smugness he might have expected. "Humbling," Marcus admits. "I had no idea how hard everyone works behind the scenes." Eleanor nods. "That's part of what makes Stella special. Sandra designed it so every position has dignity and purpose, but that's just the physical aspect of what you're learning. The more important part comes next." She hands him a folder containing customer profiles. Not the typical VIP notes about spending habits or wine preferences, but something entirely different. These are some of our regular guests, not celebrities or big spenders, but people who embody what Stella is about. Marcus opens the folder, finding stories rather than statistics. Mrs. Abernathy, 78 years old, comes every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Former concert pianist until arthritis ended her career. Husband died last year. Saves all month to dine here. Because it was their special place. Always orders the smallest steak and nurses 1 glass of wine all evening. The Rodriguez family visits on the last Sunday each month. Parents work multiple jobs to make ends meet. They bring their daughter, who has culinary aspirations. They share appetizers and entrees to make the experience affordable. Mr. Tomlinson, retired teacher living on a pension, dressed always in the same carefully maintained suit, comes on his birthday each year and orders the tasting menu. Tips generously despite limited means. Marcus looks up, confused. These aren't VIPs, aren't they? Elena challenges gently. Sandra created these profiles herself. These are the guests she wants us to recognize and honor, not just those with expensive watches or designer clothes. Marcus continues reading, seeing dozens of similar profiles. Ordinary people for whom dining at Stella represents something special, meaningful, sometimes sacrificial. People he would have relegated to corner tables without a second thought. Don't understand, he says finally. How can a restaurant of this caliber prioritize guests who spend so little? That's exactly the mindset Sandra is trying to change, Elena explains. Stella is profitable because of our wealthy regulars, yes, but its soul, its purpose, is to provide extraordinary experiences to all guests, regardless of their spending. Power. As the afternoon progresses, Marcus observes Elena interacting with various guests. She greets Mrs. Abernathy with genuine warmth, ensuring her favorite table is available, even though it's in prime location. She welcomes a shabbily dressed man whom Marcus would have immediately judged, only to learn he's a renowned food critic, known for disguising himself. The clothes, the appearances, they tell you nothing about a person's worth or what they bring to Stella, Elena tells him. Some of our most important regulars look ordinary by Beverly Hills standards. By evening service, Marcus has been positioned at the host stand alongside David, observing the arrival process from a new perspective. When a casually dressed older couple enters without a reservation, Marcus recognizes them from the profiles. The Hendersons celebrating their 50th anniversary. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, he greets them, surprising David with his recognition. We've been expecting you. Your table is ready. As he escorts them to a prime table with a city view, Mrs. Henderson smiles up at him. You're new, aren't you? We've been coming here since opening night and I don't recognize you. I'm not new, Marcus replies thoughtfully, but I am seeing things differently tonight. Later, as the dining room fills with the usual mix of celebrities, wealthy regulars and special occasion diners, Marcus watches with new eyes. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry that once signaled priority guests to him now seem like superficial markers compared to the stories he now knows about many of the less flashy patrons. Sandra arrives midway through dinner service, taking her seat at the bar to observe discreetly. She notices Marcus placing a young couple celebrating an engagement at one of the best tables, despite their obviously limited budget evident in their once-a-year special occasion attire. When he passes her position at the bar, she calls him over. I see you've been studying the guest profiles. Marcus nods. It's changed how I see everyone who walks through that door. That's the point, Sandra says. Behind every person is a story we don't know. Some are celebrating triumphs we can't imagine. Others are carrying burdens we can't see. Our job isn't to judge which stories deserve our best. It's to honor all of them. I think I'm beginning to understand, Marcus says quietly. As he returns to his duties, Sandra watches him interact with various guests. The genuine attention he gives to an elderly woman dining alone, the respect he shows to a family with somewhat unruly children, the same professional courtesy he extends to both the famous actor in the corner and the teacher celebrating a modest promotion. It's not perfection. She catches moments where his old instincts surface, but it's progress, genuine and visible. The transformation has begun, not through humiliation or punishment, but through understanding and expanded perspective. As the evening winds down, Marcus finds himself assisting Jorge with the closing cleanup, a task he'd previously considered beneath his position. They work side by side, the dishwasher and the once arrogant server, now just two men ensuring Stella will be ready for tomorrow's guests. "You know," Jorge says as they finish, "Ms. Bullock comes to help sometimes too. Last Christmas Eve she was here washing dishes when our second dishwasher got sick." Marcus pauses, dish towel in hand. "The owner of the restaurant was washing dishes." Jorge nods. "She said no job here is too small for anyone. That's why we all love working for her." As Marcus hangs up his apron, this final revelation settles over him. The understanding that true dignity comes not from status or position, but from how we value ourselves and others, regardless of the work we do. 3 weeks into Marcus's re-education, Stella's staff notice a marked difference in his demeanor. Gone is the calculating assessment of guests based on their appearance. The subtle hierarchies he once created through seating arrangements and service quality have disappeared. Even his posture has changed, less rigid and performative, more genuinely attentive. Elena observes these changes with quiet satisfaction as they prepare for the evening service. "You've come a long way," she tells him as they polish silverware together, a task he once would have delegated to others. "I still catch myself sometimes," Marcus admits, "old habits of judging people based on appearances, but I'm getting better at recognizing those thoughts and correcting them." "That's all any of us can do," Elena replies. "Growth isn't about perfection, it's about awareness and effort." Tonight is special. Sandra has arranged for Marcus to handle an important test. She's invited both Thomas Whitfield and the couple who had observed his treatment of her that first night to dine at Stella. Neither party knows about Marcus's retraining, and Sandra wants to see how he handles serving those who witnessed his previous behavior. As Marcus reviews the reservation list, he recognizes the names and feels a flutter of anxiety. "They'll remember how I acted," he tells David. "They saw everything." David places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's precisely the point. They'll also see who you're becoming." The evening begins smoothly. Marcus greets early diners with genuine warmth, taking special care with an older woman celebrating her birthday alone, exactly the type of guest he would have previously relegated to an inferior table. Instead, he places her at a prime window seat and ensures the kitchen prepares a special complimentary dessert. When Thomas Whitfield arrives, Marcus feels his confidence waver. This distinguished gentleman had called him out directly, had recognized Sandra when Marcus had failed to see beyond appearances. "Mr. Whitfield," Marcus greets him, maintaining eye contact despite his discomfort. "Welcome back to Stella. Your usual table is ready." Thomas studies Marcus carefully, noting the absence of the artificial deference that once characterized the server's interactions with high-status guests. "Thank you, Marcus," he says, using his name purposefully. "And how are you this evening?" The simple question, acknowledging Marcus as a person rather than just a service provider, catches him off guard. "I'm well, sir. Learning something new every day." Thomas nods thoughtfully. "The best of us always are." As Marcus escorts him to his table, Thomas adds quietly, "I know what Ms. Bullock has undertaken with you. It's a rare person who offers such an opportunity, an even rarer one who embraces it." Before Marcus can respond, the couple from that fateful night, Andrew and Catherine Morrison, enter the restaurant. Marcus excuses himself from Thomas's table and returns to the host stand to greet them personally. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, welcome to Stella," he says, genuine smile replacing the practiced one he once wore like armor. Catherine's eyes widen slightly in recognition. "You remember us?" There's caution in her voice, the memory of his previous behavior clearly fresh in her mind. "Of course," Marcus replies simply. "You were here the night I learned the most important lesson of my career." He pauses, then adds, "With sincerity, I'd like to offer you one of our best tables tonight, not because you're friends of Ms. Bullock or because you're valued guests, though both are true, but because every guest at Stella deserves our best." Andrew and Catherine exchange surprised glances, then follow Marcus to a beautiful table in the heart of the dining room. As he presents menus and explains the evening's specials, Catherine notices how he speaks to them, not with the artificial polish he once reserved for VIPs or the condescension he showed to Sandra, but with authentic attentiveness. Throughout the evening, Marcus divides his attention equally among his tables, from the celebrating couple who ordered the most expensive champagne to the nervous young man proposing on a clearly tight budget. Each receives the same level of care, the same quality of service, the same genuine respect. Near the end of service, Sandra arrives, taking a seat at the bar as has become her habit during Marcus's training. She watches as he delivers dessert to Thomas's table and checks in with the Morrisons one final time before their departure. As the Morrisons pass the bar on their way out, they pause to speak with Sandra. "Whatever you did with that young man," Catherine tells her quietly, "it worked. The transformation is remarkable." "He did the work," Sandra replies. "I just created the opportunity." When the last guests have departed and the staff begins closing procedures, Sandra calls everyone together in the dining room. The entire team, from dishwashers to chefs, bussers to bartenders, gathers in a circle, an unusual occurrence. That generates curious whispers. "Tomorrow marks 1 month since we began what I like to think of as Stella's renewal," Sandra begins. "A recommitment to the values that were our foundation 5 years ago. Marcus has been the most visible part of this journey, but each of you has contributed to reaffirming what makes this restaurant special." She gestures for Marcus to join her at the center of the circle. "When I opened Stella, I made a promise that this would be a place where every person is treated with equal dignity, where we see beyond appearances to the humanity we all share." She looks around at her assembled staff. Somewhere along the way, some of us lost sight of that vision. Marcus nods, accepting his role in that drift without defensiveness. "The lesson isn't just for Marcus," Sandra continues. "It's for all of us. How easily we can slip into judging others based on superficial criteria. How quickly we can forget that the person in worn jeans might be kinder than the one in a designer suit. That the woman seated alone might have a richer story than the celebrity at the next table." She turns to face Marcus directly now. "Tomorrow marks the end of our formal agreement. You've worked in every position, learned from every team member, and demonstrated real change. The question now is, what happens next?" The room falls silent, all eyes on Marcus. This is the moment of truth. Will he return to his former position, continue his journey of growth, or take a different path entirely? "I've been thinking about that," Marcus replies, his voice steady despite the pressure of the moment. "If you're willing, I'd like to develop a formal training program for all new staff members and refresher training for current ones, focused on Stella's founding values. The same journey I've taken, but as a preventative measure rather than a corrective one." Murmurs of approval ripple through the gathered staff. Sandra smiles, clearly pleased with his suggestion. "And your role as server?" "I'd like to continue," Marcus says, "but with a difference. I want to mentor new servers, helping them understand from the beginning what took me too long to learn. That true hospitality sees the person, not the wallet or the wardrobe." Sandra extends her hand, and Marcus shakes it firmly. "Then we have an agreement," she says, "and a new chapter for Stella." As the staff disperses to complete their closing duties, Elena approaches Marcus. "You passed the test," she says with a warm smile. "What test?" he asks. "The most important one," she replies. "You learn to see yourself clearly. Once you do that, you can truly see others." 6 months later, Stella glows with renewed purpose. The physical space remains unchanged. The same elegant lighting, the same crystal chandeliers, the same sophisticated decor, but the atmosphere has subtly transformed. There's a warmth that transcends luxury, a genuine spirit of welcome that greets every guest who walks through the door. On this particular evening, Sandra arrives unannounced through the back entrance. She's dressed in simple jeans, a comfortable sweater and worn sneakers, almost identical to her outfit from that fateful night. Her hair is pulled back in a casual ponytail, her face bearing minimal makeup after a day of filming. She slips through the kitchen, exchanging quiet greetings with the staff, then moves to the dining room entrance where she pauses to observe. The restaurant hums with activity. A full house on a Tuesday night, a testament to its continued success. Sandra's eyes scan the space, noting the details that might escape others. How the host greets each arriving party with the same genuine welcome, regardless of their attire. How tables are allocated based on preference and need, rather than perceived status. How servers engage with each guest as an individual rather than a transaction. And there, moving with confident grace through the dining room, is Marcus. 6 months as Stella's hospitality director have transformed him in subtle but significant ways. His technical service remains impeccable, but gone is the calculating assessment that once preceded it. He moves between tables with the same attentive care for all, from the celebrating couple clearly splurging on a once-a-year night out to the Hollywood producer who dines here weekly. Sandra watches as Marcus personally delivers a special birthday dessert to an elderly woman dining alone. The same attention he might once have reserved for celebrities. His smile is genuine, his interest in her celebration authentic. When she mentions her late husband who used to bring her here annually, Marcus sits briefly at her table, listening with undivided attention despite the busy restaurant around him. When Marcus looks up and notices Sandra at the entrance, surprise crosses his face before he composes himself and approaches her. "Ms. Bullock," he greets her, his tone warm but professional. "We weren't expecting you this evening." "That was the idea," Sandra replies with a smile. "I wanted to see Stella as it truly is when no one's performing for the owner." Marcus nods, understanding her intention. "Would you like your usual table?" "Actually," Sandra says, "I'd like to be seated as any walk-in guest would be. No special treatment." A flicker of recognition passes across Marcus's face. He understands this is a test, but not of him personally. It's an assessment of the systems and culture they've built together over the past 6 months. "Of course," he says. "Emma is handling the host stand tonight as part of her training. Would you like me to seat you, or would you prefer the authentic experience of being greeted by her?" Sandra smiles at this thoughtful question. "The authentic experience, please." Marcus escorts her to the entrance where Emma, a new hire, greets Sandra without recognition, exactly as Sandra hoped. "Good evening," Emma says warmly. "Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" "No," Sandra replies. "I was hoping you might have a table available." Emma checks her tablet. "We're quite full this evening, but we can certainly accommodate you. It might be about a 15-minute wait for a standard table, or we have seating available at our bar if you'd prefer that." "The bar would be perfect," Sandra says, noting how Emma offered options rather than assumptions. "Wonderful," Emma responds, gathering a menu. "Please follow me." As they walk through the dining room, Sandra notices that Emma doesn't lead her to the worst seat at the bar, but to a comfortable corner position with a good view of both the restaurant and the bartender's craft. "Will this be suitable?" Emma asks. "It's perfect, thank you," Sandra replies, genuinely pleased. Throughout her meal, Sandra experiences Stella not as its owner, but as an ordinary guest. The bartender, Michael, treats her with the same friendly professionalism he shows to regulars on either side of her. Her server, Javier, explains menu items with enthusiasm rather than condescension when she asks questions. When she requests a modification to her order, it's accommodated without hesitation or judgment. Midway through her meal, Sandra notices a young family being seated at a prime table, parents with a teenage daughter who's clearly celebrating something special. The girl's wide-eyed excitement as she takes in the elegant surroundings reminds Sandra of herself at that age, when restaurants like this seemed like magical, inaccessible places. Marcus approaches their table with special attention, and Sandra overhears him asking the daughter about her culinary ambitions. The girl mentions wanting to be a chef someday, and Marcus arranges an impromptu kitchen tour between courses, the kind of memorable experience that might inspire a lifelong passion. Later, when Sandra has finished her meal, Marcus joins her at the bar during a quiet moment. "So," he says with a hint of nervous anticipation, "how was your experience as an ordinary guest?" "Extraordinary," Sandra replies honestly, which is exactly what it should be for everyone who walks through those doors. Marcus nods, relief and pride evident in his expression. "We've implemented everything we discussed. The training program for new hires, the refresher sessions for existing staff, the removal of all VIP designations from our reservation system." He pauses. "Now we only note specific needs, anniversaries, birthdays, accessibility requirements, never perceived status." "I noticed," Sandra says, "and the difference is palpable." "There's something else I wanted to show you," Marcus adds, retrieving a tablet from behind the bar. "Our reviews over the past 6 months." Sandra scrolls through the recent feedback, noting the consistent mentions of inclusive atmosphere, equal treatment, and genuine hospitality. One review particularly catches her attention, an older woman thanking Stella for making her feel valued despite dining alone. "I've never felt invisible here," she wrote, "even though I'm not young or wealthy or famous. This," Sandra says, tapping the screen, "this is exactly why I created Stella." As the evening winds down, Sandra joins Marcus, David, and Chef Michael in the manager's office for an impromptu meeting. The restaurant's financial reports are displayed on David's computer, showing numbers that have only improved since implementing the new approach. "It turns out," David observes, "that treating everyone with equal dignity is not just the right thing to do, it's good business. Word has spread about the atmosphere here, and we're attracting a broader clientele while retaining our regulars. People can feel the difference," Chef Michael adds. "Even with the same menu, the same decor, guests respond to authentic respect. They taste it in the food." Sandra nods, satisfaction evident in her expression. "My grandmother used to say that the main ingredient in any great meal is the intention behind it. When we cook with love, when we serve with respect, people experience that as clearly as they taste the food." She turns to Marcus. "You've been the catalyst for this transformation, taking what could have been a moment of personal humiliation and turning it into growth for yourself and the entire team." Marcus shakes his head modestly. "I just applied what you taught me, that seeing people, really seeing them beyond appearances, changes everything." As they prepare to leave for the night, Sandra pauses at the door. "6 months ago, I came here to test whether we'd lost our way. Tonight, I came to see if we'd found it again." She smiles at the team that has brought her vision to life. Stella would be proud of what her name represents here. Outside the restaurant, Sandra pauses to look back at the elegant facade with its subtle signage and warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk. She remembers that night 6 months ago, walking in dressed casually, treated as if she didn't belong in her own establishment. The pain of that experience has been transformed into something powerful, a recommitment to the values she holds dear, values her grandmother instilled in her long before fame or fortune entered her life. In a world that often judges by appearance, wealth or status, Stella stands as a testament to a different possibility. That true hospitality, like true humanity, sees beyond the surface to recognize the dignity in every person who walks through the door. If you enjoyed this story about Sandra Bullock's lesson in equality and respect, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of celebrities, making a difference in unexpected ways. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we'll share another heartwarming story that reveals the true character of a beloved star when the cameras aren't rolling.